What time are we at, Beth? Are we ready to get started?
Yeah, we got another minute here.
Okay. So you just testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yep. Maybe you should say we want to start gathering. You're going to your seat.
If everyone can start gathering and going to your seats so we can get started. We're going to go ahead and get started in like a second and a half. Tell me when we're ready, Beth. We are. Another second. We'll give it another second. Yeah. If you still have your questions and they're not completed, we have someone walking down the aisle to pick those up.
Jeff, raise your hand.
Jeff, can you raise your hand, please? Jeff will be walking around, and if you have your questions completed, he'll take them from you. You can put them in the bowl. Ready? I hope everybody's seated. We'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. I am Regina Duncan, the Beloit City Council President. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I want to briefly recognize our Beloit City Council members. If you can please stand when I call your name, that'd be great. Vice President Nancy Forbeck. Councilor Sherry Blakely. Councilor Clinton Anderson. Councilor Kevin Day. Councilor Kevin Levy. And Councilor Marquise Terrell. I want to thank each of you for your hard work and for the respect and civility that you have shown throughout that process. You may be seated. Next, I want to thank our interim city manager, Beth Krieger, for all her assistance too. Beth, it is much appreciated. This is an exciting time for Beloit. Together, we are going to select the next Beloit city manager. So let's get started. That said, our consultant from Baker Tilly, Patty Hanover, and I hope did I say that right, Patty? Patty Himover will give us direction. And thank you, Patty, for being part of this process. If you could come forward at this time, please.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight to have an opportunity for you to see and hear from each of the three candidates. Just a little bit about what's going to happen tonight. Each of the candidates will be providing about a 10-minute presentation. They will be talking about their qualifications and why they want to be here in Beloit. For those that are in attendance, we do have note cards in the back. You're welcome to fill it out with a question that you have, and we'll be going around the room and putting them in a bowl. And then we will also have, these are QR codes. They are in the back, and if you put your phone up to it, you can then provide feedback on each of the candidates for us. This is really important for you to fill this out. There's about 3 questions on each of the candidates. If you're not comfortable by using the QR code, We do have paper copies in the back if you would like to complete it, and we will then enter that information into the system. For those people that are watching live, we do have the QR code on the city website and also on the city Facebook page. If you could please have it completed by 9 o'clock tonight, because we will shut it down and then we will be providing that feedback to council. So that is really important. So what they'll be doing is they'll be doing like a short presentation, about 10 minutes. Beth is going to help me. We're going to ask some of the questions from you. Then we'll be going on to the next candidate. And then when we're done with all three, they will all come back down here, so you will have an opportunity to meet them personally. So thank you, and we are going to start. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, I think we're all set.
Thanks, Blaine.
Yep, good evening, everybody. My name's Blaine Wing, and it sounds like I'm the first candidate for this evening. So they do have me duly mic'd up, so I guess we're live streaming as well as you have me here, I guess, on this mic as well as on my lapels. This evening, I do have a brief presentation. As was stated, there was a few questions for us to address, and then there's going to be some times for some questions, is my understanding. So with that, I'll just dive right in. So as one of the candidates, they asked us to provide some general information. So this is going to be kind of like an electronic resume, if you will. So I'm not going to read verbatim here, but I've been in local government. I've worked for 7 communities thus far. I started off in 1999 doing an internship with the city of Battle Creek, Michigan. And then each one of these categories, I'll get into my experience here in a minute, as well as then my education, certifications, and awards. In my last full-time community that I've been at, and I'll hit that in a second, this is primarily what I worked on. So I was doing labor relations, community development, a lot of HR work, infrastructure, budgeting, grants, technology, and general government stuff. As for experience, right now I'm currently an interim village manager through a staffing agency. I have a commitment until the end of March. That is a community in Michigan called Sparta. Prior to that, I worked in Rochester, Michigan, just under 7 years. Before that, I was in Des Plaines, which is right over by O'Hare Airport, as their HR director. That's a community just under 60,000. Prior to that, I was in Oak Brook, Illinois, for just over 6 years as the assistant manager. At a certain point in time, I actually acted up, if you will. My boss, he's now fine, but he had pancreatic cancer, so he was off for a little bit. So I was doing both jobs. So I know how that is when you're doing wearing 2 hats. Before that, I was an assistant administrator, different form of government in Cary, Illinois. Population just under 20,000. 6 years in Flossmoor as the assistant to a manager, and then as I started first as an intern and then administrative assistant in the city manager's office back in '99 through 2000, which leads actually well into my education. I went to undergrad at Western Michigan University and studied political science and then general university studies. During my coursework, I did have an introduction to public administration, and I had a professor who was a practitioner, and I directly went right in towards my master's in public administration. I focused on both local government and HR, and you'll see HR pop up here in a moment as well. So I really enjoy being with people and helping people out. While I was in Illinois, I did pick up at Northwestern an e-media certificate. So that was website design, digital media, digital video, that sort of stuff. And currently, I'm actually taking a class through the University of Michigan on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, HR component stuff. I do have both the 2 highest level within I guess in the United States. I don't have the global, but I have the 2 highest, which is the senior professional HR certification, both through SHRM, which is a Society of HR Management, and HRCI, and both of those right now are good through 2024. And in 2021, in December, I earned the ICMA and professional development. I went through a 9-month program and earned the high performance leadership master certificate. And prior to that, a couple of years earlier, I did spend a full week over in Disney and went through their Disney Institute program. If you ever get an opportunity to see behind the curtains, it's quite an interesting. They do have some online ones as well, but I did earn a certificate there. While I was in Illinois, I was involved in a couple different organizations. IPower is the HR one, and I worked my way up to the board level. And during my time, I earned the Special Appreciation Award. And ILCMA is the state level. I was the president of the Assistant Association, but I did do some different efforts really promoting the next generation of government for other individuals to kind of come up, and I earned a Special Service Award. All right, so the main question, then we'll kind of get into the meat of these things, is why would I be a good fit for the next manager? I've off to the side listed off, and I'll have on the next slide as well, but the reasons really are right here. I'm going to be connected. I'm going to live in the community. My wife and my 11, almost 12-month-old, my son actually in almost 10 days is going to turn 1, will be involved in the community. We'll be attending events, festivals, be participating in activities, attending the library, using the parks, be a member of the local church, really just get involved in the community. So being connected. Next, can be a champion of the strategic plan. Council really has worked quite hard, and I believe it was November adopted this past year, adopted the strategic plan that has, it's a 25-page document that outlines 6 goals and then has different skills or different tasks and responsibilities for us to accomplish. As I've listed here, they've done the heavy lifting. And for us, now's the time to really start implementing that strategic plan. There's measures in there so that we can actually provide feedback, both to council and to the public. And I guess if I was selected, I'm recommending doing quarterly updates to council as well as to the public. One of the other reasons, getting to know people. Again, I've kind of already highlighted my HR background, so I'm going to be that little touch and feely kind of out in there, not sitting in an office, being out actually in the community, in the departments, and working with individuals. So after I get appointed, I'd be reaching out to make connections. All sorts of groups, businesses, our residents, the library, the school district. My understanding is we have a new superintendent, colleges, hospitals, neighboring governments. I do know some of the managers and other staff in neighboring communities. Again, working with our electeds at the state and through the agencies, nonprofits, whoever I can basically get connected up to and with, want to do that. In past jobs, I've also done tours of businesses and had staff meetings, so the businesses get to know not just me, but the staff. And I've also done, and I would do here, is coffee with the manager. I've done that at the library. And I'd be happy to do that. That gives once a month an opportunity for the public to come ask questions. A few more reasons. If selected, I would be promoting the community. So I would be one of the most visible and vocal cheerleaders for Beloit. I'll be collaboratively working with the Greater Chamber, the Visit Beloit organization, colleges, nonprofits, our residents to be our ambassadors, as well as business, again, various leaders, our elected leaders, as well as our staff. Finally, partnerships. This one's a no-brainer to me. By basically collaborating and partnering, all of our efforts are multiplied. And I see that really is just something that, again, just already meeting the directors and some of the staff, we're building on, and we're really poised to take that next really big leap forward. And I'm excited, and that's part of the reason why I would like to work here. Again, for me as an HR person, having these core organizational values, this is actually right off the website, spells it out. So again, being safe as an HR individual, first you gotta have that safety component. I think for all of us, the health safety before we can even do anything, and I'm glad that's actually the first one. Ethical behavior, we need to really set that standard and be an example. Leadership through myself, our staff, and all the way through the organization doing training. Public service, outstanding public service. So we're actually, and then if you look into the actual goals, there's several things that we want to hit on. But we're serving both our internal customers as well as the public. Inclusion and diverse ideas, creating a sense of belonging. Again, I'm already doing that class right now at the University of Michigan. And then teamwork. I'm a collaborative leader. I would say it really takes our team to complete things. And so all of these things are really a main reason why I applied for this position. While I was doing my homework on the community, you may have heard of the term a word cloud. All of the terms, I threw all 50 of them in, and if you're not familiar how this works, is the more times, the larger and the darker the color of the text. So as I looked into the community, again, over 50 words popped up, and I put all that into the module, and it spit it out like this, and so I just screenshotted it, and this is where it's at. But to me, there's so much going on, and there's a lot that I'm really excited about. And so hopefully these are terms that you might recognize from our parks, our downtown, the farmers market, the museums, playgrounds, all kinds of things. There's a lot already going on, and I feel we're not quite getting that message out to the public as well as we could, and that's one of the things I would like to help on. I know we have some time for questions, and my understanding was this is the QR card I think that's going out. I want to thank everybody, and then I also put my LinkedIn profile on there, so if there's more background stuff or anybody wants to follow up, I'm happy to do that as well.
So stay up here.
Okay.
And then just keep this on.
Sure.
On that for the public. And then just a reminder for anybody that is joining us live, we have 3 candidates tonight. Blaine was our first candidate. Anyone that would like to provide feedback, we do have a QR code on the city website and also on the city Facebook account. Anybody in the audience, we do have the QR code, or you can take it off of the presentation. If you would like a written copy, certainly fill this out, and we will put this into the system manually. Anybody that is listening, if you could please have your feedback into us by 9 o'clock this evening, because that's when it's going to shut down. And the information, all the feedback is going to be going to City Council. Now I'm going to ask Beth to come up because she is going to draw some questions. As city manager, how would you address the need of the homeless in our community?
Play a bit of musical chairs here as we probably get the question and I can answer. All right, so Battle Creek is a community that's somewhat similar, and when I was there, we dealt with several issues that we called barriers. So, and we created an initiative called Breaking Through the Barriers. Homelessness and really housing are very challenging and difficult issues. I would really use the model when I was in Battle Creek. We first partnered, well, we first did an assessment to kind of see what was going on. So first you have to gather and do some research and figure out the scope of the issue. Then working with our leaders in the church when I was in Battle Creek, we were able to identify certain sites to facilitate overnight. There's different locations for families. There's different locations for other individuals, so that it was based on even security risk and some other things. The churches I found is a big partner. In addition, there's different other nonprofits that can assist. The city's role is both partnering as well as trying to resolve what's the underlying issues. And sometimes that's, again, housing, sometimes it's jobs, sometimes it's mental health. So job training, childcare, transportation, again, getting some of those underlining issues addressed. So first getting our hands wrapped around the scope of the issue, and then coming up with some solutions as being a partner or a connector in the community.
I'm going to jump in here. Patty's got to take care of something. The next question is, what is your experience with economic development?
All right. Economic development, I've had the most work, if you pull up my resume or if it's shared, in both Oak Brook and in Rochester. So in Oak Brook, I actually went out to the National Shopping Convention in Vegas and recruited various businesses, and I was successful with several. We've also, or while I was there, we also converted one I guess, location up to an international headquarters. So they put a great investment in the community. So I've had hands-on work with CEOs and developers to actually bring both their business and jobs while I was in Oak Brook, Illinois. And then when I was in Rochester, through I don't want to use too many acronyms, so through a brownfield, a site that had some contaminants in the ground, I worked with the state and the economic authority through the state and agency to get a $1 million loan and a $1 million grant. And we were able to work with the developer who partnered up with 2 or 3 businesses, and they actually also built their headquarters and national headquarters, and then another one in their international headquarters in town on that location. Had success working with developers. I've worked on plan unit development projects, agreements. I've, again, gone to the conference where there are companies that are looking for locations to be placed, and I've worked with both in Illinois and in Michigan, the state agencies, to actually get dollars to help those things get facilitated. I'm not a huge fan of the communities giving away the incentives, because then everybody's going to have their hand out. I helped create, when I was in Oak Brook, a program called a rapid response team. So it had the community as well as representatives from the chamber, a few of the large businesses. McDonald's headquarters was at the time located there. So we had a representative from their corporation as well as the Park District. And we were able to give out memberships to the Park District for the new employees that were coming in, and other incentives that might not necessarily be dollars, but was able to be something that was put in the overall package to attract businesses. So I have had some experience. I'd probably say it's probably the medium level if you're kind of trying to rate it. If there's somebody who's been an economic development director, they're going to have a little bit more than I, but I have had some experience.
The next question is, give us 2 to 3 examples of how you have solicited involvement and collaborated with the community in your previous roles in city leadership. How would you do so here?
Yeah, easiest example is the master plan that I've worked on when I was in Rochester, having community events like this in the libraries. We had it was called the Older Persons Commission. It was basically like a rec center for anybody 55 and older. 3 communities partnered up, and so that was a great location. Had a captive audience. So it was a lot of presentations, kind of walking through what the community could look like, having a map, showing how the zoning is set up at that time, and then what we could potentially do. So we had these sort of meetings. We did some charrettes, kind of like some mock-ups of what things could potentially look like. Sent out social media to gather feedback, emails, actually mailed surveys via a postcard, so that there's different levels of participation from the public. In the end, about a 1.5-year process, we ended up creating an overall document that went to the Planning Commission and eventually to Council to be approved. Doing a similar process right now in my interim job in Sparta, again using that same template or model of really starting to meet with the public, gathering some initial feedback, and then we'll be having these sort of meetings. And so it's worked, and so I think that's the easiest way, is to request that and use not just electronic means, but also paper meetings, have interactions, having discussions, work with the businesses, and work with the residents to actually get the input, and then work with Council and the Planning Commission to make those things happen.
The next question is, what experience do you have working with developers to provide affordable housing? Beloit is at its Faircloth limit for public housing.
All right, so I know staff and the elected officials have heard me already. The first I would say from affordable housing to attainable housing. Everybody's coming from a different spot, and so affordable might be affordable in one person's mind versus another, however attainable for them when you're starting to look at an actual issue. When I met with the directors earlier this afternoon, I talked about having the full spectrum of housing. So everything from first having apartments all the way to single family, and in between you have mixed use, multiple housing. There's a full variety. I want to applaud council already for adding, just with their last update, the ability to have what I would say tiny homes that are less than 1,000 square foot. Again, those can be placed in clusters, and that just adds to the options that could be available in the community. I've worked on planned unit developments, it was touched on, so working with developers. I've worked with developers on condos, kind of almost like the townhomes, multiple levels, apartments, single family, really neighborhoods. So I've worked on various agreements with different developers, know several of the big names that are in this area, and really housing is an issue across the United States. So again, we'd first do an assessment. I would be working with our building department and the fire department to see where we're at and see what that need is. There's statistical tools using GIS, graphical information system, so using data to actually see what are the actual needs, where in that spectrum, and it could be in each one of those buckets that we're just low, but it normally is targeted, and then we look at the life cycle and the age of the community, and then we start to actually go after it. So you first kind of peel the different layers of the onion, if you will, before we just say, oh, we want this, or we'll take anything. We really want to be specific and forward-thinking. You can see some of the life cycles. Right now, in my last two communities, it's been more senior facilities. But when we're working with the developers, we just don't want that building to be here for 25 years and then torn down. We actually are looking to say, like, okay, after our population ages, can that be repurposed to potentially apartments or condos? And so that building's really going to have a different life potentially in 50 to 75 years. And I think when we start to look at things more sustainable, that they can be repurposed and reused, we're going to get a lot more value for them. So housing it's a difficult topic. Again, the process that I would do is do that assessment, work with developers once we know, and see what we can do. And again, there's different grants. Right now, Uncle Sam's given out a lot of money, so there's different grants that we can do to already work with our current homeowners. And really the goal would be to shift people from apartments and spending money that way, and helping people get to an affordable and for them an attainable level of ownership.
Last question, and it's a little bit of a long one. All right. Beloit is a border city with Illinois border to the south, bisected by a substantial river, and hemmed in by two rural township governments. What do you think are some of the unique challenges created by Beloit's unique geography, and how would you manage these external factors?
All right. Normally I'd be writing that question down. All right, so yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it looks like they typed it and brought it with them. I mean, they're ready to go. All right, so there's a lot of, let me unpack that one. There's a lot of things going on there. So when I was in Cary, I had the community that was bisected by rail lines. Working with the police and fire chief there, we already, for disaster preparedness, had to strategically make sure that we could, be ready for anything in case we just couldn't get stuff, equipment and personnel over there. Again, having rivers, or one creek and a river, that we need to, again, be strategic. So for me, one of the first things I would be doing is laying out, again, our, on a GIS map, a map of the city, and then using the geographical information, plop in our assets, being from our substations, our equipment, and see where things can be staged. Kind of one of the other components, having neighboring communities, multiple, you have different types of districts as well as another state. A good thing is with that other state, I happen to still know quite a bit of people, so I'm fairly well connected in that organization. And so, working with and having those contacts right in your cell phone is helpful. You start to practice and do drills. So if that's from disaster preparedness to just normal working on things when maybe equipment isn't working. So if that's a fire engine, a pumper truck, or something like that, that you build those mutual aid. And as those can grow, you can go from mutual aid to auto aid, so you're getting better response times and potentially cross-training, making sure the radios and the equipment work. That one, like I said, is a very complex topic, but I don't see them being as many challenges. I would look at them as more opportunities. Again, working with those different jurisdictions, I know one of the individuals up in Janesville, so I already have a connection over there, just north of us. Again, anybody who's in this position is going to really kind of have to look at it from emergency preparedness to just everyday operations and see what we can do. So I would kind of adjust it from saying what are the challenges, but more looking at it, or what are the opportunities.
All right, we have one last bonus
A
question.
bonus round, all right.
We're going to do 6 instead of 5.
Okay.
So we've got a lot of questions, so we're trying to get
Yep.
as many different topics as possible. Please comment on how you would promote the city of Beloit.
All right. So we do have a communications staff, and I understand, I think one's actually about to add dramatically onto her family. With several little ones there all at once. With me just having one, trust me, my wife and I, that's a handful already. So communication, you basically want to build a strategic communication plan. I've done that in several communities as well. I normally look at the website as kind of the hub, and again, because I grew up over in the Detroit area, I'll use examples of vehicles, so I apologize already. So looking at the center or the hub and then breaking out information from there. I still feel there's a lot of value having one-on-one conversations, meeting with individuals, and I hope to meet with some of you at the end of this when we have time to kind of mingle and maybe ask a few of the questions that weren't asked. But really, you kind of outline all of the different ways that we can communicate. So the website being the center, that's repeating information. There's social media, so there's everything from Facebook and Twitter and a whole slew of other ones, LinkedIn for jobs and a whole bunch of other stuff. Newsletters, I still am a fan of paper newsletters, actually getting quarterly mailed out to everybody. Some of those pieces of information have phone numbers and other things, sometimes calendars that can go up on the fridge. I still do it, put my little magnet and plop it up there. From water bills, using water bill, there's a little bit of space typically that we can have links and give other information. I've used through websites a communication tool that is an emergency alerting that sends out text messages, an auto kind of recorded message that does push out through social media, and it also updates on the website. So all those all rolled into one. Having community town hall meetings like this. There's quite a bit of ways to work on communication. And again, for me, the promotion component is everything, and I've done this too when there's been new logos. It's from the water tower where you have one old logo and then you have one new one. It's time to kind of, and on squad cars, there's now wraps. You don't have to paint the whole vehicle. There's these quick little wraps that can be done. There's a lot of creative ways, but all the way down to just getting thousands of pens and then having, at the local events, giveaways that we can, goodie bags, if you will, that really let the community actually help promote that new image. Building a message and a story normally works the best. And again, I don't want to jump totally into what the communication staff would do, but I would definitely be an ambassador. I would ask all of you who are here to be ambassadors, and I could see red name tags or white name tags with our logo on there, and then we have levels of ambassadors who are willing to volunteer and then talk about the community in this aspect or another. So there's a lot that can be done. I think that's actually one of the 5 or 6 different items listed there that the council really was hoping that somebody in this spot would be able to handle, and I feel very qualified to do that. And again, we do have an excellent staff already that's there. A bonus question? Or,
Absolutely.
All right.
Last thing, would you like to give a closing statement?
Sure. I don't want to take the other individual's time away, but again, I want to share that my wife and I, when I did apply for this position, came up right after Thanksgiving. It was actually nice weather, and so we were able to come downtown, eat, go to some of the parks. We're looking, my wife and I with the little one, are looking for a place to call home. And I hope you guys feel that I'm the match and that I'm a good fit for you. I will put my whole heart into this. And again, I'm that touchy-feely HR person. I will be supportive of our staff. I will work with our elected officials, and I hope to work with you. So I hope I can answer more questions later on, but I do thank council already for moving me to being one of the finalists. To me, this is an exciting town, and I hope I can be a part of it.
Thank you very, very much. Very nice job, Blaine. We are going to take just a little bit of a recess because he is going to have to take the mics off, and then we'll have to put it on the next candidate. So it will be just a couple of minutes. But I do want to clarify regarding the QR code and how that works. What you would need to do is take your phone and put it up, go to your photos, and once you click on it, click on the QR code and it'll come up with the feedback. If you have any questions, I will be around here to answer any of those questions. So we're going to just take a few minutes and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. evening. We would like to get started with our second candidate. Thank you. Thank you for your patience while we get Casey with his microphones on this evening. Our second candidate that will be presenting will be Casey Bradley. He will be doing a presentation and then he will also be asked a set of questions. Welcome, Casey.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for spending your Friday night listening to the candidates for the city manager's position. So, as Patty stated, my name is Casey Bradley. I'm currently the city administrator for the city of Baraboo. Originally from Wisconsin. I was born and raised in New Lisbon, Wisconsin. I'm sure everyone knows right where that's at. Small town, central Wisconsin. Grew up in a military family. My father was in the military, retired in 2010. He was actually attached to the guard unit down here in Beloit and did a lot of his training down here. So with that, my background educationally, I have a master's of public administration from Penn State, a master's of accounting and financial management from Keller Graduate School, bachelor of science in management finance, and another bachelor's degree in management human resources. And I'm also a graduate of the Senior Executives in State and Local Government program at Harvard University. Professional experience, after high school, went into the military, served 6 years in the Air Force out at Great Falls, Montana, Malmstrom Air Force Base. So never was at a base that had a plane. I worked on ICBM Minuteman missiles, so I worked underground in the missile silos. Public administration experience. After getting out of the Air Force, I started at the city of Monroe as the city of Monroe's first accounting manager. So spent a few years down in Monroe and progressed up into a finance director's position. When I was at Houston County in Minnesota, decided to go back and get my MPA, my Master's in Public Administration, and work more into an administrative role. I moved out to North Dakota and received my first administrative position, spent about 6.5 years out there working on a variety of different things and trying to get back home closer to family. In 2017, I moved back to Wisconsin and was the first or second county manager for the Adams County, Wisconsin. Worked there a little over 3 years. Had some changes in my life, went through a divorce and moved down to Baraboo to be closer, not have to commute so much with my kids. So I've been the city administrator with the city of Baraboo since 2020 and working there on a number of different things. And then also since 2013 roughly, been pretty consistent. I've been a adjunct professor at 2 different universities. At the University of Mary in North Dakota, I helped actually create their Masters of Public Administration program and helped implement that. Now I teach some of the courses for that, and I do some undergraduate teaching for them as well. And then with Park University, that's where I received my undergrad degrees from, I do a couple different courses for them in their MPA program as well. So as far as just some selected professional accomplishments, I know economic development's a big thing in Wisconsin, obviously, with our limitations for net new growth being limited to construction, new construction. In economic development, while I was in North Dakota, we had a very high priority given to primary sector development, which is heavy industry for the most part. Pretty much everything else is very limited, even more limited than what you can do in the state of Wisconsin. So we focused heavily on heavy industry, and no, it was not oil related, any of the development we did. So down in the lower left-hand corner here, we got to create a very unique industrial park. It's called Spiritwood Energy Park Association. The acronym is SEPA. This is a screenshot off their website, but we actually created a rail loop around about 550 acres of industrial land. That ethanol plant was the cleanest ethanol plant and the first one licensed under the new Obama administration EPA guidelines. So it took us a couple of years to actually get the licensing done. That was about a $160 million project. Burlington Northern Santa Fe main line runs through the northern part of that, so it's a critical piece to getting commodities to market, especially for the heavy industry. On the other side of the road, we did a $450 million ethanol plant. We did a $330 million wind farm and a couple other smaller projects. So in the middle here is a project that I'm currently working on at the city of Baraboo. We've got about $330 million worth of housing projects going on in Baraboo. About 1,451 housing units that are going up. And then the one on the far right there, that is a housing development that's proposed for downtown Baraboo that we're working on as well. Move on. Professional accomplishments under fiscal management, implemented capital management programs at multiple entities that I've worked at, guided new software implementations, new accounting, full ERP systems programs at several different entities that I've been at. Grant funding, successfully written or lobbied for grants at the state, federal, local, and with private entities. Most recently, just before the end of the year, I worked with Congressman Pocan and Senator Tammy Baldwin's office, and we received a $500,000 direct appropriation from Congress for that park that we were just looking at that's going on in downtown Baraboo. So that has state funding that we've worked with the DNR for stewardship funding, and then we're getting some congressional funding, and then we're also partnering with some local entities to do some projects down there as well. Help redesign benefit plans for 2 self-funded health insurance employers that I worked with. And then on the bottom here is fiscal transparency software. It's a screenshot off of Stutzman County, North Dakota's website that I helped create or implement when we were out there. This particular software was originally, the name of the company was Sicarda Software. We partnered with Sicarda and helped develop the software with them. We initially bought what they were selling and then worked with them to redesign it to better fit what we felt our public needed. After we did that, Sicarda came back and gave us, as a part of us working with them, they actually gave us that software for free, the upgraded portion. And then the first county to actually purchase that was LA County out in California. So subsequently, we switched to Tyler Technology, which in the state of Wisconsin, their typical product is Munis. They saw what we did when we switched our accounting system over to them, and they actually went and bought this software. So now it's a Tyler Tech company. See, on the technology side, just a few different things I've done there. Transitioned a couple different entities to paperless meetings, as well as streamlining operations and going paperless as much as possible. Transitioned a couple different entities to cloud-based computing. At City of Baraboo, we're currently transitioning to the Microsoft platform. At Adams County, we actually transitioned the entire county to the Google platform. So it's kind of what fits best for the operational needs. We also, in North Dakota, for some of the work we did in IT, we actually were the IT Innovators of the Year, I think, in 2014. So number of different initiatives that we've worked on. Just some other things that I think are applicable to City of Beloit. In Adams County, I worked with my HHS staff to bring drug abuse mental health clinic into the community. We worked with our federal partners and state of Wisconsin, and we were able to get a federal grant that actually brought La Clinica into the community. They put a base in our county at the county seat, and then they also brought a couple outreach clinics to neighboring communities. So we're able to, Adams County has the worst access to healthcare in the state of Wisconsin. So we leverage that, and we're able to get a fully funded medical facility in with outreach-based preliminary around substance abuse. We helped implement staff training for poverty, inclusion, and diversity training. Did that both out in North Dakota and in Adams County. Couple different projects we did. One really neat one in Stutzman County, just because we were going through so much change and population change. Our staff was having issues kind of relating to the public, so we brought a group in that specialized in just helping people understand poverty, generational poverty, and how that affects how they interact with different groups. So a lot of work in that area as well. Establishing outreach programs in our public schools. Helped establish a student government program in Adams County that both Wisconsin Dells High School and Adams High School actually gave credit for their students to participate in the program. And then we help guide communities through multiple disasters. And then I was also on the Federal Election Assistance Commission for a number of years. So, and then kind of the question that was posed was, why Beloit? From a personal standpoint, looking at the professional side of the job, I think the city is a great organization. I think structurally, it's well staffed. I think you have some great department heads. Looking at the plans that are in place, the partnerships that are in place, I think it's positioned very well to move forward. The demand for development is extremely high, which sits well. I know it always takes a while to get that done, but in the state of Wisconsin, if you don't have a demand for development, you're going backwards. So I think Beloit is in a very good situation. Strong base of existing businesses. I think you have a very vibrant arts and community culture, which makes it very attractive. Obviously, being a community a college community, that really helps to bring a different vibe to your community. So I think that's a very strong aspect of the community. Support. Your city council is definitely a champion of the community. Having the opportunity to interview with city council. I'm interviewing you guys as much as you're interviewing me, and to me, that's a group that was very positive in both their communications that you see that gets put out, as well as having the opportunity to sit there and kind of hear their feedback and their perception of the community. So that was great for me to see. You kind of see it, through the different communications, but seeing it in person, that really kind of reinforced my decision to apply here. And then the strategic plan, I think you guys have a very sound strategic plan. I think it's very realistic. So that is something I think is a great tool and will help move the community forward. And then the stakeholders, the partnerships that you guys have throughout the community and with surrounding communities, I think is very positive. From a personal aspect, I think you have great quality of life. The things that I look for, I don't think I really covered. I have 4 children. I have 2 children that are in college, one at UW Eau Claire. She graduates in May. She will be commissioning in May in the Army. My other daughter is a junior at UW-Madison, and then I have one in high school and one in middle school. So I kind of look at what kind of amenities in a community that my children are going to enjoy and I'm going to enjoy. So I think Beloit has a great offering across the board for all of them. My boys are very interested in the sports facilities. You guys have a lot of amenities that we don't have in the Baraboo area. So those are things we're excited about. Obviously, a college community is something that's very significant. That was a tool that I had out in North Dakota. We routinely, when we met with developers, would have the college at the table to talk about how they could help benefit kind of that straight demand meeting their demand and getting students in, and whether it be through internships or direct hiring. And then obviously you have a lot of revitalization in the downtown area going on, which is very exciting. And then just kind of what does a transition look like? I know that's kind of hard until you actually get in there. You know, meeting with staff, meeting with council, relationship building. I think that's probably the most crucial part of a city manager position, is building those relationships with the community, with the staff, with the council, and then trying to champion initiatives through. Gaining an understanding of the organization, internal perceptions, concerns, ideas, status of strategic priorities, and then the status of projects. So the first process is really gaining an understanding, and then building relationships, and then figuring out how to keep moving things forward. And then community transition, getting out, meeting community groups, business leaders, stakeholders, partnering organizations, moving into the community. I know that's something that's been brought up a couple different times. You know, to me, being active and living in the community is very important. Like I said, I have children. I don't like running all over if I don't have to, because I'm doing it anyways with them. So to be able to you know, run into people when you're out shopping or going out to eat, stuff like that, I think is important. I think it's important for the community to see me, and it's important for me to see the community. So to me, that it really is not an option not to be a part of the community in the community. So I put that on there, and then being active and engaged in the community. So, you know, I get involved in a lot of stuff through work, and I also get involved traditionally in a lot of things with my children. So I've been on the soccer board, the swim board, and spent a lot of my life doing that kind of stuff, and hockey as well. So I think that is the last of what I have.
So the next part of the process will be that we have about 6 questions for you.
Okay.
And then after that, then later on this evening, you'll be back down here to meet and greet the community.
All right, thank
All
you.
right? So we'll start with the questions.
All right, the first question is, Beloit is a diverse community. How would you specifically engage with and collaborate with the Hispanic and African American population?
I think, you know, you can't just say this is the one way you're going to interact with a specific segment of your population. I think that comes through understanding who community leaders are, focusing on establishing relationships with them, and then finding avenues to engage those segments of the community in the ways that they need to be engaged. It's not one size fits all. It's tailoring communications to each group specifically, so you're adequately engaging everyone, and you're getting the appropriate response levels from everyone, so people feel like they're a part of the community instead of just being left out of the community. So that's always a challenge, and it's not just, you know, it's an age issue. The way we all receive our information is very different, let alone culturally. So it's something we have to be very cognizant of, and very focused and deliberate in how we're going about addressing those groups.
Okay, the next question is, if hired as city manager, how do you see yourself working with other managers in surrounding communities to help foster and strengthen economic development in our area?
So that's something, you know, I kind of attribute to, that's the only way to do business in the state of Wisconsin. You know, we have to partner with surrounding communities, different organizations that we traditionally might not have, just with the limitations that exist. You know, one example of doing that recently, we have in the Baraboo area, we have a fire department that was until December 31st, that fire department was a city organization. And we had an ambulance, paramedic, full paramedic ambulance, EMS program that was a district. So in 2021, we started evaluating that. How could we better fund and ultimately make them more sustainable long-term, which under the state of Wisconsin guidelines, you have to, the only way to exempt fire and EMS is to combine them into a district, and then they become eligible for CPI plus 2% instead of just net new growth. So because of the players that were involved in the district, the ambulance district served the exact same population that our fire district did. So we brought in an outside group that was independent and didn't have the history of the different disagreements between the different entities. They did an independent analysis. They came back with a recommendation of combining our fire and EMS into one district. So we spent the last year working with all of the stakeholders, which were, I believe we had 5 townships. 2 of the townships dropped out, and they're contracting back for just EMS services because they were actually in a different fire district already. So they're no longer a part of the district, but they are contracting for services, and the rest remaining, we have the city, the village, and 3 or 4 townships that are involved. So that's something actively do now. And as far as working on just economic development specifically, in North Dakota, we had a joint Jamestown-Sutsman County Economic Development Corporation. It was very, very similar to the Greater Beloit Economic Development Corporation, where we were all stakeholders in it, and we worked through that group for development projects. And that SEPA project that I put up there was actually run by the joint corporation that was the city, the county, and all of our private entities that are involved, as well as community groups. So.
Okay, this next one's a bit long. I'm going to leave it up here when I'm done reading. In March of 2021, the City Council of Beloit proclaimed the goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2040. Please provide 2 to 3 examples of how you have led sustainability and carbon reducing efforts in the past. Additionally, how would you collaborate with the community and council to help Beloit achieve this ambitious goal?
All right. The city of Baraboo actually passed a very similar goal a few years before I started there, and that's something we've been working towards. We're currently building a $11 million addition to the library in the city of Baraboo. With that one, we're actually putting on solar. Much of that was funded through community funding. I think of the $11 million, $6 million is coming from the city, and the other $5 million is coming from community groups. One of the priorities in the community group was that we move forward with putting solar onto that. We're in the process of costing that out. Phase 1, which is the new addition, will be done around May, June timeframe, and at that point, we'll be looking at putting solar onto the building. We're also looking at, as a part of transitioning the fire and EMS into a district. They did start as a new district on January 1st of this year, but the city is committed to building new facilities that are more adequate and better suited for their needs and the growth that is taking place in the community. So we're actually building a new fire station that'll have EMS in it, and then we're building a substation as well for them. One on each side of the city, and for those, we're evaluating, going through an engineering analysis of geothermal, as well as looking at solar to offset their carbon output there. So that's something, we're doing in building projects for our existing facilities. We actually have a community group called Powered Up Baraboo that regularly we work with on different initiatives. They're very proactive, and it's kind of nice on our side. We don't have a whole lot of staff to necessarily fully explore opportunities in this area. This group is very gracious and helps us out with a lot of those. We're exploring right now putting EV stations into downtown Baraboo. So as tourists come in, they'll have EV stations right there. We're looking at full change out of putting LED lights into our civic center. They're looking at actually doing some fundraising for us to help offset the cost of doing that. So a number of different initiatives that currently working on. I think I covered it.
What are your thoughts on a collaborative working relationship between the city council and the school district?
I think a collaborative working relationship with all of our governing entities in the area, to include schools and our nonprofits, is critical for all of us, not just city council, but that is something that I've always had and always strive for. At City of Baraboo, I'm very involved with the school district. We try to leverage our resources together. Through that process, we worked with our department heads on how we're going to come up with those cuts. And because of the relationship we had with the school, kind of one of the things that was identified through not necessarily a high priority was our school resource program that some of our council members kind of wanted to target. The school felt that that was a critical program that they needed, so they actually stepped up and funded that for the next year for 2023. So they're funding the officers for the first time in 20-some years. So they were, because of the relationship we had in that program, we were able to work with them, and actually they're not going to see any affected change in their operations. So yes, I think our involvement in the school, whether it be reaching out into the classrooms or bringing kids into work in government, I think is critical for all of us, and it just helps the youth get more engaged in local government as well.
And final question. Through this search process, have you noticed any opportunities or challenges for our city, and how do you believe you could help in those areas?
Definitely on the opportunity side, I think, like I said, I really believe Beloit is poised for significant growth. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Obviously, with growth comes challenges. You're going to see changing dynamics in the community. Those are things that we need to work on as collectively as a group to continue moving forward and make sure that we focus on sustaining quality of life, making sure that access to resources and amenities that make living in Beloit great, make sure they stay that way or get better. Change doesn't necessarily have to be bad. So I think those opportunities are there. The challenges I think Beloit faces, I think, are challenges that every community in Wisconsin, for the most part, are faced with. Stifling levy limits are something that we all struggle with. So there's definitely opportunities. I think part of what the legislature has tried to push us towards is more collaboration, and we're seeing that. I think Beloit is doing a very good job at that. I think it's things like that need to continue. Looking at any way we possibly can to make sure that we can maintain critical services and maintain the health of the organization as a whole. I think those are important, and I think we need to find innovative ways to do that. Thank you.
Before you depart, would you like to have a closing statement?
All right, well, thank you guys. Thank you for spending your evening and Friday night listening to us talk. So I really do appreciate it. I really, truly am excited about this opportunity. I think Beloit's a great community. I think my skill set matches very well with what I think Beloit needs. So I look forward to potentially having the opportunity to work with you guys again. Thank you.
Thank you again, Casey. As we prepare for the next candidate, we're going to take just a brief 2 or 3 minutes to get set up. So thank you. Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad you are. I think we'll get started with our last candidate. For those individuals that are joining us live, I would just like to remind them there is a feedback on the city website or by going to the city Facebook account. There is a QR code that you would put your phone up to, and the survey is on there. There's 3 questions asking feedback from each of the candidates. So we encourage everyone to fill that out. Anybody in the audience, we do have paper copies. And what we'll be doing is we'll be shutting this down at 9 o'clock tonight, so your feedback is really important. This is our last candidate. Jerry, would you like to come up to the podium?
Yeah, sure.
And present? Oh, be careful, no workers'
I'm
comp.
mic'd up, you can all hear me. Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Jerry Gabrielatos. I'm thrilled to be here. I told someone outside that I had to look for parking on a Friday night. That shows how seriously you're taking this and how much you care about Beloit. As a candidate, it thrills me. I like working with involved constituencies, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So my career breaks down into 3 chapters, if you will. I started my career in Chicago, working for members of the Chicago City Council. After that, I went to Albert Lea, Minnesota, which is just up the road on 90. Albert Lea, a little bit more rural, lots of corn and soy, population 18,000, but a county of 30,000. And then for the last 2 years, I was city manager in Westland, Oregon, right outside Portland. A little bit more liberal constituency, and I'll talk about some of the things that I did there. It's not on here, but I went to Tulane in New Orleans. Very proud to say that we're the 9th best football school in the country right now. We've never been good at football. And then I did grad school at Northwestern in Evanston. So started my career in Chicago, and I put all the communities that I worked in because it's not too far from here. I figured you might recognize some of them, and I want to underline something that I was Director of Constituent Services, Chief of Staff, and Senior Advisor. I saw in some media outlet that it said that I was a council member. That's not true. I just want to dispel that right away. And I did that for 6 years. The way that I structured this agenda was I reviewed your strategic plan and then highlighted things that I did in each community that are sort of reflective of what I would do in Beloit if I came here. So you can sort of see how I go about approaching problems and the solutions that I developed. In all of those roles, for those 6 years, I was the liaison to every one of what was then the city's 27 different departments. So city managers are sort of generalists by nature. I know a little bit about everything, and I rely on those department heads to provide that subject matter expertise when we're approaching a problem. Some of the biggest things that I did in Chicago, I hate to perpetuate stereotypes, but the ward that I worked in had a fair amount of gang violence. In fact, one of the last times I saw this many people in a room for work on a Friday night was after a shooting that we had that was on the front page of the paper in Chicago about 13 years ago. But in response to that, I went out and organized 170 households in essentially what was a community watch. We revitalized the neighborhood association. I'm really proud of that work. I also advocated that the police use social media, which was in 2009, innovative. Then I saw in the strategic plan that there's issues with problem buildings. When I was working in Chicago, this was right after and during the recession, we had a lot of unbuilt buildings that were attractive for gangs and drugs. Spent a lot of my time going to court and working with the city's legal team at getting rid of those problems. In the legislative part of my job, so aldermen represent each constituency, but there's also a role that they play within the council chambers, voting on matters that affect the entire city. It was my boss. We championed a ban on plastic bags. This was, again, innovative 13 years ago. But I put that on there to illustrate the fact that we worked collaboratively with 49 other aldermen and the mayor's office and the business community to get that across the finish line. Created a media presence for the alderman, so the alderman that I worked for was the most followed on Twitter and Facebook. When I left the office, he was somebody that the media usually went to for quotes. I'll talk a little bit more about how I've used media in some other parts of this. And then it also taught me how to look at operations and improve them. So we developed a program that I spoke about at the American Public Works Association conference about how to remove graffiti. The photos for this, obviously threw a plastic bag on there, but I threw on a photo of my coworkers because those 4 people, 4 of us, all started at the same time in Chicago, and we still have a group text today. This work is about meeting people in relationships, and I thought it would be fun to throw that on there. I also don't have a lot of photos from that time in my work history. So before moving to Albert Lea, I went to grad school. I mentioned that. And Albert Lea is, to me, a little bit like Beloit. If you look at our demographics, similar to Beloit in education and income levels. And Albert Lea had a meatpacking plant. It was burned down, and the city sort of struggled to diversify its economy after that. If I look at a Beloit parallel, I would say what happened with the foundry here. I would say, though, that Beloit's a lot farther in its economic development work, thanks to all the work that you've done. And there was just sort of a sense of frustration that the residents had, even when I got there in 2015. The plant burned down in 2001. But folks were struggling to figure out what they were going to do next. And so go to what I helped do while I was there. I love main streets. Beloit has a main street. I've walked downtown. I haven't popped into the Main Street office yet. But one of the things I did in Albert Lea was unite our 5 economic development entities. Why we had 5 in a county of 30,000 still blows me away. But united us all under the Main Street umbrella. And you'll see there in the corner that there's 4 different ways that Main Streets come together: economic vitality, design, community transformation, organization, and promotion. We did all of that collectively and sort of assigned people roles and worked with that. I put together, did the stuff that every economic development professional does, put together plans for site selectors, incentive packages, whatnot, but also used incentives for the existing businesses within the community. Frankly, that's where you're going to get the most growth. So we offer tax credits for job creation. And then, given that there's colleges here, I wanted to highlight the fact that I created a portal that connects all of our colleges in Albert Lea, sort of around Albert Lea, to the employers that were willing to offer internships, shadowing, mentoring, full-on employment, whatever it might be for those students. And workforce was a huge issue in Albert Lea. We struggled to find workers. So that was a way that we thought we might get some more folks to fill jobs. One of the things that's been emphasized by Patty and council and other conversations I've had and research is communication, community engagement, and marketing. This is what I like doing best. It's why I applied for this job, recognizing that I had a skill set that I think could benefit Beloit. So not long after starting in Albert Lea, I went door to door in 2 parts of town where we just finished a community survey, and the data indicated that we just weren't performing as well as the rest of the city. I went door to door to sort of figure out why. But I really engaged a lot of constituents who don't get involved with city government usually, and those conversations formed the backbone for a lot of the work that I did both with policy and operations while I was in Albert Lea. We developed an outreach program for the Latino and Karen communities. Those are the 2 communities, predominant communities of color in Albert Lea. So I met with the Karen community before church, meeting people where they are, going door to door, whatever it might be, and meeting with the Latino community after church. And then I also brought in constituents, if they were willing, to help us create programming that really reflected the diverse constituency that we had. I found that it was something that we lacked prior to my getting there. I also made the rounds at every coffee clutch in town. You're probably members of them yourselves. If you don't know, this is where everybody knows everything. So I went there to learn in part, get some wisdom that they were willing to share. I also was a member of the United Way, and I went to every organization that the United Way donated to, and then highlighted all of the work that those nonprofits did on the city's webpage. It was a way that I got to know the nonprofit community in town. And then with the business community, partnered with the chamber. We also had an economic development authority and got to know every business that we had in town. Toured their factories, learned a lot about potato salad at Mrs. Jerry's to how they make hot dogs at Cargill, was part of all of that. And on the food processing note, I should mention that the way I became familiar with Beloit too is my wife worked at Hormel in Austin while we lived in Minnesota, and she'd have to pop down to Beloit for work, and then on a personal level, driving back from Albert Lea to Chicago because Chicago's home, became familiar with Beloit through that as well. Finally, we ramped up a lot of our communications, so it began an e-newsletter, a printed newsletter. I went on the radio. And I frequently pitch stories to the media. So Albert Lea, not surprisingly, a little bit slow news town. So I put together a bunch of stories that I wanted the press to cover, complete with people who were willing to go on the record for on-camera interviews or whatever it was. Gave that to the press and recognizing that they would cover the story eventually, and it paid some dividends. So I'm going to talk about some of the fun parts of the job, and then when I talk about West Lynn, I'll talk about the fun that I didn't have. So one of the, I'll get there. So I had some fun in Albert Lea. We created a social media campaign based on the fact that one day it was, I don't know if you all can see that, but it was minus 29 in Albert Lea and it was minus 10 in Arica. So we started this sort of spoof thing where we created this character who would try to get into the pool or go to the beach during the winter. And the far thing on the right is a sticker that someone created, and now people put it on their coffee mugs. That is me in the photo. It's extremely cold doing that. What that did was really get followed a whole bunch on social media. And for as much as we hate to admit this, we're always looking at our phones all the time. And we developed messaging sort of around that character and tied it in with messaging or messages that the city had. So on the right, or on the left, is the governor participating in a joke with me. He was in town for the governor's fishing opener. They thought it was pretty fun. We also used the character to bring attention to the census. So in the top right is me literally counting people one by one. And then because the mayor's a good sport, he wore a Census Nerd t-shirt during one of our meetings. But again, it brought attention to things that people usually scroll past, because as soon as you start talking about the census or things like that, it's sort of like talking about your credit card agreement. This was a way to sort of bring light and humor to what we had. The other stuff, Minnesota uses bonding to get money from the legislature, so we used the character to help bring attention to the things that the city was trying to get money for. Here's an Abbey Road parody. We wanted folks to stop for pedestrians, so we did that. And then we also did this campaign called This Is Why You Live Here. So I run and bike a whole bunch, and I'd stop and take photos and upload them to our socials and just caption This Is Why You Live Here. Albert Lea's a really pretty community. And I think that's my favorite photo. So marketing, community image, and community relations was a huge part of my job there. And one of the marks I use to measure this is I remember walking into a bar in Albert Lea, and two people I didn't know were talking about what the city was posting on its social media that day. Barroom conversations about government social media was the sort of sign to me that I made it. And now we'll transition to the part where I didn't have any fun. So after I left Albert Lea, I'll talk about my first 6 months in West Lynn. All of these things happened during a pandemic. None of them are arguably related to Beloit, but I think once I get done telling this story, you'll see that I'm sort of resilient and I've been through a whole bunch of stuff. So I started in September of 2020. Oregon was suffering from wildfires. Our staff had to relocate because they lived in areas that were affected by the wildfires. West Lynn was not hit. In October, I had council members file a harassment claim against another member of council, and then they put the video of that on our website. As city manager, it puts me in the middle of a really crazy situation. In November, our computers went down while everybody was working from home. In December, I made a tough decision to terminate the police chief, and I'll get to that a little bit later. In January, I had outgoing council members leave in what our local paper called a disgraceful exit. They were not leaving office. And in February of 2021, I had an ice storm with 34,000 cubic yards of tree debris, 2,400 downed trees, and many without power for a week, all during my first 6 months, all during a pandemic. I didn't see any of my staff. Well, I shouldn't say it like that, but staff did not come back to City Hall until June of 2021. So it was a crazy 6 months. If you're wondering what all of that tree debris looks like, that's what it looks like. And I don't know if you can see the construction device that we have over here, but I was standing on, I think those things were probably like 50 feet high. That's not even all of the debris. The rest of the debris was in another parking lot. Most of the work that I did in Westland was related to our police department, and thankfully there's not any police issues here where I needed to jump in and grab this immediately. But I walked into Westland and right after the department had made national news for a wrongful arrest. The former police chief got together with a friend of his. The friend asked for the Westland Police Department to go arrest this employee under wrongful charges. It made national news. It was something that I dealt with every day that I was there. But basically, we had to restore trust in our police department. So before I got there, the council had created a citizen-led task force to create a set of recommendations that we, as management, would take into bargaining with our union. Sorry, just a second. And all the work with the task force was done online, in public. It had to be done in public, but it was done online because of the pandemic. Really difficult work. People approached it with emotion, rightfully so, but we did get a set of recommendations that we did take into bargaining with our union. The sort of core principles that I took from that task force work were transparency and accountability. So I used those as the guideposts for the rest of the work that we did while I was with the city of Westland. Every other session with our union was in public, so we bargained our contracts in public. I'm only aware of Portland did that as well, but I'm not aware of other cities nationally that have done that. But we did that to show people what was going on. We also, through the negotiation, got our officers to wear body cameras. The union was very supportive of that. And then after I made a decision to terminate the chief, I asked the recruiter that helped us to meet with anybody that was willing to talk to her, individuals, groups, whoever it might be, to provide feedback for the the position profile that was developed for the next chief. And then other parts of the work that we did, I had residents serve on hiring panels. They were there when candidates got interviewed. And then we created what we called a review and recommend group, which I think was pretty innovative for a city of our size, 27 sworn officers. The review and recommend group is a permanently formed board or commission, and the group will review police policy as well as review police complaints. And just so you know how this part works, because I'm proud of it, now when a complaint gets processed with the PD there, a citizen, a city manager, police chief, HR director, labor attorney will review the complaint. A citizen will be in the room for when a decision gets made about whether or not there should be an investigation, whether or not an investigation will be internal or external, the results of the investigation, and then whether or not a decision is made about discipline. It was a lot of work, and I'm not aware of other cities of Westland's size that do that. And then finally, we replaced an officer position with a behavioral health specialist. So this is someone who would respond to calls for drugs or substance abuse, things of that nature. And every officer that I talked to about it was thrilled. And then I put together one last slide that sort of just, I won't go through all of these, but I know sustainability and resilience is important based on the strategic plan. These are some of the things that I've done related to sustainability and resilience in West Lynn and in Albert Lee. I think that might be it. Oh, wait. Yeah, so that's who I am, what I've done as it relates to Beloit. Thrilled to be here. So, you're giving me, okay, you looked at your watch. I guess I'm done. That's fine.
He got it. He got it. He got the clue.
Okay.
You're good. Now you have a set of about 6 questions that you're going to be asked.
All right.
So you will need to stay up here for
Okay.
a little bit longer.
All right.
I'm going to sneak it on you, Jerry, and share that mic here. All right, the first question involves employee engagement. How would you engage with the city employees, and how would you deal with low morale issues?
Okay. So as it relates to employee engagement, I think by doing all that stupid stuff I did with the pool guy, it showed that I have a sense of humor and that I'm approachable. one of the things that I reflect on is that in the city hall that I was in Albert Lea, our offices were literally in the corner. And it's the wrong message that you want to send. So just like I did with the public and the external audiences, I met people where they were internally. So I showed up at officer roll calls. I got to know all the cops. With firefighters, I did, as part of a social media campaign, we did something called Firefighter Friday, where I'd interview them and talk about what they've done, why they're firefighters, really highlighted the work that they've done. I did ride-alongs with the police. I even did a Citizens Academy to learn more about policing in Albert Lea. What else did I do? I did a lot of that stuff. With Public Works, always showed up to the garage, and I think they were appreciative of that. Went frequently to the library. I was pretty much everywhere. One of the things as assistant city manager is you're sort of like the bridge from management to the rest of the organization. And sometimes it's not the easiest thing to go talk to the city manager. Having been both city manager and assistant city manager, I understand that. So I work to build that bridge with management quite a bit. The question about low morale is a great one. Every organization in the country is suffering from difficulty with recruitment and retention. I would start with the baseline of, are we paying people what we should? And do they like the people that they work with? And do they feel valued? Those are the things that I would do out of the gate. I've had some time to reflect on that question because in West Lynn, we were losing people, because of our cascading levels of crisis, but also because it was just sort of where we were as a country. So I've looked at what some other cities do as far as morale and retention. I would probably put together a program that, whether it be lunch and learns or whatnot, so that employees are learning more, they're engaged, and they're involved in everything that the city is doing. Just so I left the city of West Lynn of my own accord, decided not to renew my contract, and for the past few months I've been working with the city of Lake Oswego, another city in Oregon, and I have a brilliant city manager there who's taught me a whole bunch, and I love the way that she interacts with her employees. So she does an email newsletter just from her that highlights what she's been up to, what the council's up to, and it really does a great job at keeping the rest of the staff informed. As the person who sits directly outside her office, her door really is always open. She's great to banter with, and I like to think that I am too, so I would take that same approach.
All right, the next question is, inflation has outpaced the median wages in Beloit. How do you feel local city government could help lessen the impact of our overburdened families?
That's a great question. So the approach I might take immediately is examine how much folks are being taxed. Take a look at our budget and see that we're taxing at a rate that makes some sense. I would imagine doing that. If we need to pursue a budget that might need reductions, and I would never get rid of staff or anything like that, but I would say that a city that I'm familiar with did a service inventory of all the city services that the city offers. The city manager asked directors to provide a cost per service, everything from Cadillac to bare bones. And they had a community-wide discussion about the services the city provides, and might be something where you need to reduce services on that note. I will say that inflation seems to be getting a little bit better based on some of the headlines I've read recently. But that's a great question. I'd also take a look at seeing what services the city might be able to offer for free by use of the library or park and rec to sort of supplement whatever might be going on. Off the cuff, I think that's the best I can do.
Next question is, how would you promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, both within the city and with the community?
Sure. So,
Would you please repeat the question?
yeah.
How would you promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, both within the city and the community?
I'd probably take an approach that we took in West Lynn. I mentioned that arrest. The person that the PD arrested was African American, and we had some major work to do as a result of that. We had major work to do before that, but that really emphasized it. So Not long after I arrived, we had a consultant come in and do a DEI audit, taking a look at the city as an organization, and then the city as a whole, all 27,000 people. The person, after we got the results of the audit, there were recommendations in there. I put together a team internally to take a look at how we could begin to implement the recommendations from the audit. I didn't put that in here, but if you go to the City of Westland's website, I asked our staff to do quarterly updates on where we were on all of that work. And we began to implement it and then moved to the second phase just as I was leaving. But that's the approach I would probably take, is the audit, putting together a team to work on it internally. I would also do a bunch of work externally. A lot of the work that I did in Westland was limited by the pandemic. Just for perspective, we had to wear masks for 2/3 of the time that I was there. Not that the masks are prohibited or by any means, but it made it difficult with social distancing and whatnot to begin to form relationships, and that work needed to be done in person. Was there a second part of that question that I missed?
Just within the city and outside.
Oh, then I answered it. Okay.
All right. This next one's another long one, so I'm going to leave the question when I leave. For many years, infrastructure investments across the country have catered to the ease of fast-moving motor vehicles. As a result, there are serious public safety issues for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers alike, associated with speeding, distracted driving, reckless driving, and traffic congestion. Please provide 1 to 2 examples of how you have invested in safety solutions benefiting commuters who walk or bike, and how would you approach this issue in Beloit?
This is a book. But I'm happy to answer it. So I wish I had a link to the City of Albert Lee's website, because what we did there was we highlighted all the investments that we made in infrastructure for people who walked or biked. That includes bike lanes, adding sidewalks, all of those sort of stuff. The other part that we did, and this was sort of from the economic development perspective, was we highlighted all the space that we had in our downtown that was available for parking. Parking it's not a great use of space. A quarter of the public space in any city is used for parking. That's not a great use. But the reason that I highlighted it in the downtown, because arguably the property within your downtown is the most expensive and the most likely to be developed, and having it reserved for parking just didn't make a lot of sense to me. So we put up a map on our city website that highlighted all of the places that were available for parking, and the argument being that there's a better use for it. We also did something called Parking Day, where we converted one of those parking lots into a park for the day to highlight that space could be used differently. I'm going to look at this for another second here because there's a lot here. Those are the ways that I would highlight the investment getting made. I would also say that, it's on here, I won a grant for electric bikes to be used in Albert Lea, so what I did there, and sort of just this highlights the way I think. I took a look at all the data that we had about people who commuted to and from within the city. Albert Lea, by distance, is only about 6 miles wide. My argument was you could take an electric bike and get from one end of the city to the other end, and biking's just a better way to get around. And you saw the photo that I had earlier of the lake. I tried making an argument publicly, too, that using your car is a waste of time, gas, whatnot, and it's just a better way to do it. And then the other thing on here, Albert Lea was the first city in the country to become a Blue Zone city. So the Blue Zones program is from Dan Buettner. He went around and studied how people live to be 100. Not surprisingly, they walk and bike a lot. Highlighted that. I don't know if there's any other part of this. And then as far as the safety issue, I'd rely on PD to police. While I was in Westland, we bought a motorcycle for traffic violations. And as someone who still lives in Westland, I see that guy writing tickets quite a bit. So he's doing his job, and hopefully the message is getting out of there that speeding is not something that's gonna fly. The rest of this, I don't know if I can solve reckless driving.
I'm going to apologize in advance for this one, Jared. It's a little bit long as well. Beloit has done amazing things in terms of economic development. The city has been great to work with through approval process. However, they have not been in a position to be an investor partner in many cases. How would you like to change that? And do you feel it's important for the city to be willing to be a financial participant to help the city grow even more?
Yes, absolutely. I believe it's important for the city to be a financial partner. We were in Albert Lee. We offered incentive packages. In West Lynn, one of the things we did there was, as I was leaving, we were creating a TIF for economic development. In West Lynn, too, we added a staffer in our last budget specifically for the business community. That's the approach that I would take. I would say, too, in Albert Lee, the top goal of our council each year was to increase the tax base. And we did it because during the 8 years, and I wasn't there for 8 years, but we never had a tax increase in our operating levy because our tax base kept growing. I'm proud of that work. I think cities have to be participants in the economy. I would also say, too, that I'm looking over at the person who presented to council recently on the economic development going on in Beloit, having watched that presentation. There's a lot of great stuff happening here. And, I'd aid in any way I could, but I saw all the development. I've walked through the downtown. I drove through everything recently, and there's a lot here that frankly make this so attractive to me. So I'd be willing to help in any way I could. I would see if there's a way that we could become an investing partner with, so long as the council agrees. I don't think I missed any part of this question. Okay, good. I'm gonna throw in one other thing, sorry. But I saw that Beloit recently redid some of its housing code to be more accommodating for housing. I think that's really smart. City should be doing that. And the reason I highlight that is I think that everything should sort of be on the table as it relates to this. I know Beloit's unemployment rate is pretty low, and it's pretty low in the country right now, but that doesn't mean that there's not more work to do.
You scared me and I lost my card. Here we go. Okay. The last one's a multi-part question, so I'll let you pick two of the topics that are there. How will you solve the current challenges and improve the city of Beloit? They list economic development, public safety, education, housing, and business growth, jobs with 2 exclamation points.
In just 30 seconds, all of it? I've kind of talked about some of the economic development things that I've done. I don't know that I would add any else to that. With public safety, I've also talked a little bit about what I've done in terms of policing, so I'll grab the housing one. In Albert Lee, we took a sort of approach that ran the whole spectrum, and that is to say that that grant that I won for the downtown was for low-income housing, so we sort of checked that box. We partnered with our Housing and Redevelopment Authority on housing that needed to be repaired. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we created tax abatement by working with our county and school district for abatement on any new construction to sort of galvanize more, to galvanize more construction, which was, I'd look to see if that could be done here. Having watched that presentation, I think it is. With business growth and jobs, 2 exclamation marks, I work closely with the economic and community development directors to figure out what more we could be doing, and then with education, partner with the school district. So this is a pretty broad question, but I don't know that there's part of it that I don't know. Maybe afterward you can ask me more specific questions. So, cool.
So, just to wrap this up, Jerry, would you like to give a closing statement?
Oh, yeah, sure. Earlier, I got, in one of the interviews, I got asked why Beloit. And I said the time that I spent in Albert Lee was the most fun I had as city manager. And I created an impact. And I'll tell you the story of how I know I created an impact, right? It wasn't all the stuff that we did. It was, I went back to Minnesota in April, and I was leaving the grocery store, and someone I worked with, a community member, stopped me and he was like, "Oh, hey, Jerry, is that you? I thought you moved to Oregon." And I said, "Yeah." And he just sort of said, "Man, everything you did for the city." And I thought, like, that's, as city manager, it doesn't get higher praise than that. To be remembered 2 years after really meant a lot to me. I think that what I could bring to Beloit, I might have that conversation with someone 2 years after I'm leaving the parking lot here. But I do want to stay here for a long time. But the point that I'm making is I do invest everything I have into the job, and it's why my hair is gray. And it's why I have so much fun, and I think that there's really room in Beloit for my skill set to match up well with the city. So I'm thrilled.
First, I just want to mention to everybody, all the candidates did a really good job tonight. And if you didn't know, they've had a full day. So Jerry, each person was talking pretty fast, but that's why. They've had a long day today. They've toured the city. They've had interviews with the staff. And so that brings me to this point. So what's next? Next, I just want to let everyone in the room know that the city council will be doing a second round of interviews with the candidates tomorrow, and we will keep you informed. So as we move forward, because that's the question, what's happening next? We will definitely be very transparent, and we will be open with you and let you know where we're at. That said, thanks to everyone who took time to participate, home and virtually, in this process. And also I want to thank our candidates, Casey Bradley, Jerry Gabrielatos. Did I say that right, Jerry? A little bit? Okay. Oops. Oopsie. And Blaine Wing for coming to give their presentations to us here in Beloit. If you would like to meet them, they will be here for the next 15 to 20 minutes. And that concludes our community forum this evening. Thank you all for coming out.